ACE-MEA. Welcome everyone today to this webinar. We will be exploring e-invoicing. There is so much talk about e-invoicing. It's gaining a lot of momentum pushed by both regulatory and market-driven initiatives. Started from public procurement. It has then, it is being used much more for fiscal purposes and monitoring, in particular monitoring of VAT obligations. And as probably many of you know, this is central to the ongoing reform of the VAT directive on VAT in the digital age. And now the next step in the future is a more systematic uptake of invoicing in business-to-business transaction. But what will concern and what we will explore more today is how e-invoicing has helped and can help more fighting late payments in commercial transactions. We will also have a closer look at barriers to entry, in particular for SMEs, challenges faced by SMEs for the uptake of e-invoicing, but also how e-invoicing at the same time can be a catalyzer for the digitization of SMEs for their digital transition. And last but not least, how e-invoicing can contribute to overall better transparency and monitoring of payment behavior, thus fostering a better culture, a better payment culture in business-to-business transactions, and in particular to support enforcement and implementation of rules also by public authorities. So I will now leave the floor to Beatriz Pozo, the expert. She will present the report on e-invoicing, and further Cinzia Alcidi from CEPS will moderate the session with our distinguished guests. So for me today, I wish to thank our guests today, Roman Bocognani and Adam from Sage, and especially I thank all of you for your participation today. So Beatriz, the floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Bea, you're on mute.
You're muted, Bea.
Oh, sorry. Thank you very much, Antonella. I hope that you can see now my screen. Can you? Yes. Okay, perfect. So thank you very much for that presentation. Yeah, indeed, as she was saying, as Antonella was saying, we have made a report to explore the relationship between e-invoicing and late payments in the context of the e-observatory on payments and commercial transactions, because precisely e-invoicing is gaining momentum. It was first, the uptake of invoicing was first led by large companies that wanted to improve their internal processes, but right now it's expanding to the entire business sphere, including SMEs, and it's also being supported, as Antonella was saying, now by governments who are prioritizing this, mostly for tax purposes. There are multiple tools in which they are using to do that, and one of the most relevant ones is mandates, and which they are imposing both for B2G transactions first, and then for B2B. In that regard, in 2014, the European Commission legislated to impose a mandate for public authorities to be able to receive invoices, and now more and more member states are also establishing mandates so that public authorities, suppliers, have to send their invoices in an electronic form. And what we have found is that invoicing uptake still varies a lot within the EU, as you can see in this graph, but there is a correlation between the establishing of these mandates and invoicing uptake, as you can see here. And then, as you can see, the number one country with regards to invoicing adoption in the EU is Italy, which is also the first one to introduce a new type of mandate, which is the B2B mandate. And this resulted in Italy in a very remarkable increase in the number of companies sending invoicing. invoices. So before the mandate, this was the number in Italy was 42%, and last year in 2023, it was only 5 years later, it was 97%. So this can tell us that as these mandates are put in place, and they are being put in place by many member states, as we can see here, we can expect, let's say, a big raise in e-invoicing. And also on top of that, there is this European Commission initiative, the VAT in the Digital Age, VIDA, which is based on e-invoicing and will de facto make e-invoicing the standard for invoice transactions in Europe. So e-invoicing is gaining momentum, and what we wanted to see is if we can take advantage of this momentum to also reduce late payment. So that's what we explored in our report. And we tried to identify the possible benefits that the invoicing can have with regards to late payments and payment performance. And the first one, and most straightforward, is time efficiency gains. There is multiple research on the benefits in the cost side of invoicing, but it's also very straightforward the kind of benefits that this will bring with regards to time efficiency. So here what we have is the invoice to payment cycle. So every step necessary to make in the sending and receiving of invoices, and we can see that in each one of these steps there are possibilities to gain time thanks to invoicing. So if we compare how the things were done with paper-based invoices and how are they done with e-invoicing, for instance, while preparing an invoice, we can see that in paper-based invoices, things that had to be filled manually, which also, of course, takes a lot of time, but also brings a lot of mistakes. And then these mistakes end up delaying all the payment cycle, because if there are mistakes, invoices have to be reused, and everything is delayed. Well, with invoicing, first of all, things can be automatically filled, which reduces mistakes, improves accuracy, and this has a positive effect in payment times. Then with regards to issuing and sending the invoices, is the same. In the past, you had to print the document, put it in a letter, send it. It took several days to be received. Right now, all that can be done just with a click, thanks to e-invoicing. Then on the buyer side, it's the same. In the past, you received the invoice, you had to direct it to the correct department, then some manual checks had to be done. Right now, with invoicing, the invoice can be received directly by the appropriate department. It is not necessary to manually update anything because it can be done automatically. Some checks can also be done automatically. So, for instance, if the invoice has to be rejected because there is mistakes, it can be done way more quickly. So, in short, there are multiple time efficiency gains coming from e-invoicing, which means all the payment cycle way shorter and improves payment performance. Then we were also looking into other benefits, and I think the second most straightforward ones, and it has also been mentioned by Antonella, is transparency. One of the features of e-invoicing is its traceability, and this results in enhanced transparency both for the actors involved in the transaction, but it could also have positive benefits with regards to monitoring payment performance by externals. So with e-invoicing, every one of these steps that I showed here, it's automatically logged in, which results in way more certainty for both actors involved in the transactions, because this means that there is no possibility of lost invoices, of miscommunications, of lost emails. All this is avoided thanks to e-invoicing, and this also facilitates resolution of disputes, and as well gives more information to both actors about their own payment practices under one of their counterparts, which also could help them with regards to improve their payment performance and improve their payment practices. Then on the external side, on the monitoring, well, of course, the basis is that the more information there is, the better. And with e-invoicing, there is going to be way more information. However, this information normally only the parts involved in the transactions have it. It is not mandatorily, it is going to be held by externals or by the government, etc. However, in certain clearance models set up by governments, information of the invoices have to be passed through a governmental system. And if those clearance systems include payment data, that means that the government is going to have some data, which is happening for some clearance systems, but not for others. So this is a design choice. But of course, that information is not comprehensive. And then precisely because, as Antonella mentioned at the beginning, this is being done mostly for tax collection purposes and not for monitoring late payments. But in any case, this information could be potentially be collected. And well, finally, another benefit that we looked into, it's about supply chain finance solutions. These are the solutions that allow companies to receive the money that they are due earlier, but in exchange of paying a fee. So what we wanted to look for is if e-invoicing can facilitate the offering of these solutions in a way that's more adapted to the need of companies, particularly SMEs, because they are the ones suffering most for late payments. And well, the theory is that this could potentially happen because with invoicing, a boom of sustainable chain finance solutions is expected because they are going to have access to way more potential clients. Costs are gonna be lower, and that should result in probably lower fees. And also because e-invoicing and digitalization should lead to more innovation, which also allows for the production of more tailored products, which should be on the benefit of companies and SMEs. However, all that said, there are very few examples of this happening right now in Europe. We have seen it in other jurisdictions, but less in Europe, but this is something that could happen in the future. In any case, as we have established, there are several benefits that the invoicing could bring to the payment process and to reduce late payments. But of course, there are still challenges. And these challenges are mostly of two kinds. The first one is adoption, and the second one is related to the own design of invoicing systems. With regards to adoptions, SMEs are the type of companies that are adopting e-invoicing less, that are lagging more. And there are several reasons for this. The first one is awareness, because they are not aware of very often of the benefits of e-invoicing, so they are less willing to take it up. There are also issues with regards to costs. E-invoicing implies less costs than paper-based invoices in principle. However, that cost gains are higher the more invoices you issue and you receive. So for SMEs, the gains are lower than for big companies, which results in a higher cost for them. And then other issues regards to technical complexity, interoperability, lack of skills with regard of SMEs, etc. So of course, all these issues exist and all these challenges exist, but also what we have observed is that there are ways to overcome them. There are e-invoicing systems that are very much adapted to SMEs. They're easy to use. They integrate e-invoicing into the ERP systems, the general accounting systems of companies, which makes it very, very user-friendly. There are also solutions at a very low cost. So examples exist of how to overcome this. And then, well, the second kind of challenges are with regards to the own design of e-invoicing systems. And this stem mostly through for instance, the business friendliness of invoicing systems, what we have found is that there are, for instance, as an example, to use an example, the clearance system in Italy, it's very centralized. It has been centralized by the government, which means it's homogeneous for all businesses. However, as it has been designed, the way it has been designed, it's not always the more business friendly. This results in that often what happens is that there are like two different channels because companies want more information than the one that is transmitted through the Italian government system. So sometimes what is happening is that there is double work. Let's see, you first of all use one channel, use the government channel to transmit an invoice, but then you have another invoicing system where you are actually putting the information that the business wants. So there is double work, and this of course this of course ends every benefit and every efficiency gain that you could have experienced with invoicing. So this is an example of a design that doesn't allow to reap all the benefits of invoicing. And then the other matter, and I already talked about it, regards to the inclusion of payment data. At the moment, these systems are mostly, at least at the governmental level, being created for tax purposes, and they not always contain this information that will be very useful to combat late payments. But well, summing it up, and despite these challenges, I think that it's pretty clear that e-invoicing has a positive effect on payment performance, particularly because of the time efficiency gains, but also with regards to transparency, etc. However, you may have noticed that I haven't talked at all about behavior, and that's because e-invoicing helps in payment performance, but it does not have a direct effect on payment behavior. If a company wants to pay late, it's gonna pay late. And invoicing doesn't have an effect or a direct effect on that. So in that regard, the invoicing is a complement to other initiatives and other policies to combat late payments, but it is not the ultimate solution. Is just a part of a wider work. So I think I'm gonna conclude there and pass the floor to my colleague Cynthia to go over to the interesting debate that we are going to have right now.
Thank you very much, Bea, for presenting the key points of the thematic report. I'm sure that in the panel, some of these points will be discussed more in depth, and we will get different views. Many thanks also to Antonella for setting the scene and also making links between the topic of today and broader changes in the regulatory framework at EU level. But without further ado, let me just introduce the speakers of today. I'm really pleased to have with us Adam Prince. He is Global Head of e-invoice compliance and embedded finance strategy at Sage. Sage is a global leader in business management software. And then we have Roman Boccognani, is Deputy Director General at ANCE. ANCE is the Italian National Association of Construction Industry. And last but not least, Charles Bryant is a former Secretary General of the European e-invoicing Service Provider Association. There's very long experience and extremely broad knowledge of the e-invoicing. So I would like to start with Adam. Adam, as I say, you come really from the industry perspective, from the provider of the software. I would like to ask you to bring in your experience and what you know from your clients concerning the benefits and the challenges related to e-invoicing when it comes to the late payment. Adam, the floor is yours.
Hello, and thank you very much. Hello, everybody. From Sage, what we tend to find is companies reach a point when they come from small micro businesses, when they first put in software. Very quickly after that, they find a sweet spot where they can digitize and automate. The more they can benefit, the more they use. we've done some surveys, and between small and medium companies, after a couple of years, it's somewhere, excuse me, I've got the fix, somewhere between 3 and 11 times the investment that they get back on investing in business software, specifically for e-invoicing. So they are saving time because they're saving money. That speaks directly to businesses. Part of the time they're saving, though, is the data entry, the error correction. Over 70% of senior managers get involved in an invoice issue at least once a month. And that just distracts them. Nobody really gets into business because they want to issue invoices and pay them. There's a few geeks like me that like tax, but we're a rare breed. So by letting the systems enter data correctly, transmit data correctly, resolve disputes quickly, you remove a lot of the causes of late payment. Yes, as was said earlier, if a company has a cash flow problem, or they're just a poor business in the way they treat their suppliers and decide they will pay late, there's nothing e-invoicing can do about it. But I think it's something like only 20% of invoices are intentionally paid late. The majority are paid late because the invoice has got stuck somewhere in the internal process. There was an error when it was coded. The invoice didn't have all the information that was needed because maybe it got damaged while it was being posted or scanned in, and somebody's got to go back to the supplier and ask for the information again. And e-invoice has so many benefits. It takes away the ecological impacts. It lets businesses work faster. But specifically looking at late payments, it removes all the non-intentional causes of late payment. And for the majority of businesses, that means eliminating late payment. And then you can have things like legislation, the late payment directives, etc., that look after persistent bad payers and make them pay according to the terms of any commercial agreements.
Adam, if I may follow up quickly, what are the challenges from the side of companies to adopt e-invoicing?
Firstly, it's awareness. Again, Sage had surveyed about 9,000 small and medium-sized businesses in Europe a few months ago, and only 28%, just over a quarter of businesses, were even aware of e-invoicing. Now, this includes countries like France, Spain, Germany, that have got mandates on the horizon. Italy, it's pretty much forced, but it also includes countries like the UK, which e-invoicing is discussed, it's legal, it's available, but it's not commonly discussed by government at business-to-business level. So awareness is the number one problem. Once you go beyond awareness, you get to, well, can my software do it? Because virtually every business has software. And what we find is the majority of businesses today are using cloud-enabled or cloud-native solutions, or they've got a subscription because they need updates for tax and other reasons. And the majority of the software already does the e-invoicing. It's just the businesses don't know about it. So it's that getting them to be aware of it, getting them to understand they've got access to it. Very often, there's no additional cost to switching it on. And then they find the benefits, and maybe they then want to look at, I don't know, accounts receivable or accounts payable automation, integrated finance, so they can get access to lower cost funds, maybe invoice factoring, things like that. But those are the upsides. That awareness is the biggest single barrier.
Thanks a lot, Adam, for highlighting these 2 points, really on the side of the benefit and the fact that basically involuntary late payment can be removed substantially through invoicing, and other side the issue of the awareness. I would like now to move to Roman, but maybe let me tell everyone that if you would like to ask questions, please type in your question in the Q&A function, which is at the bottom of the screen, so everyone can use this function. Let me now move to Roman. Roman, we heard that basically Italy is one of the countries where e-invoicing is most used essentially because there's been a mandate, and it is compulsory in G2B businesses, and now for tax purposes also extended to the B2B. You represent the construction sector that we know unfortunately is one of the sectors which is most hit by the problem of late payment. So we thought it would be really interesting to hear your perspective when it comes to the impact of e-invoicing on late payments. Roman, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for inviting Anche to speak at this webinar. I will share with you a short presentation, and I will try to share with you the views of companies in Italy in general, and in the construction sector in particular. So I have 4 points. The first one is that we agree with the report conclusions, and also with Adam, on the positive impact that e-invoicing has in terms of payment simplifications and transparency. In Italy and in the construction sector, it has had a very positive impact in this regard. We also recognize that e-invoicing has made it possible to achieve the objectives of a simplification from the point of view of VAT obligations related to this accounting document. However, from our perspective, it is necessary to take a further step and provide for a reduction in controls related to transactions that involve the insurance of invoices. From this point of view, it will be reasonable to for the checks to be targeted and not generalized, as we have in Italy, to avoid a waste of public resources, which are currently allocated to cover controls on companies. And in this respect, we think there is room for improvement. The second point is that the practice of e-invoicing has been introduced, as Beatrice told, with two main objectives. The first one is ensuring the payment of VAT, and the second one is tackling late payments. In dealing with public authorities, e-invoicing mechanism plays a role that is parallel to the one of a split payment mechanism. Split payment is only present in Italy and Poland in Europe, and it is a mechanism that leaves the responsibility to pay VAT directly to the contracting authority, to prevent the contractor from disappearing without paying VAT. And it had been introduced with the same goal as the e-invoicing, but it also caused a drop in liquidity for enterprises. And Italy is the only country in Europe with the two mechanisms, e-invoicing and split payment. And we think split payment still drains liquidity away from companies. And for example, in Italy, in the construction sector, we estimate the loss of liquidity to be at least 3 billion euros every year. So it's very important for companies. The third point is although e-invoicing can have a positive impact on transparency and payment delays, invoicing is just one step of a more complex payment procedure, as Beatrice told during the presentation of the report. And in Italy, contracting authorities find ways to delay their payments in other steps of the process. For example, in public works in Italy, the invoice is a detail in the payment procedure, and it is not the main reference point for the delays. And in particular, the evaluation of payment delays in the construction sector, as Antonella knows very well, is linked to the work progress report, so-called Stato Avanzamento Lavori, SAL, issued by the project manager, that means by the public authorities. And the public authorities often instrumentally delay the preparation of this public works report in order to delay payments without being in default. And then they ask the company to issue the invoice only when they are certain they can pay. So the invoice is a detail in the payment procedure. Last point, but what I have described represents a specificity related to the public works sector in Italy, and its companies that turn over about 45 billion euros a year. So it's a big sector and a big problem, but it is not a general problem in Italy. And in Italy, the invoicing mechanism has also proved to be very useful, for example, in monitoring milestones towards the achievement of objectives in the National Recovery and Resilience Plan, that includes targets for reducing payment delays by the public authorities. For example, by the first quarter of 2025, we will have to settle the invoices within 30 days, and within 60 days for the National Health Service bodies. But despite this, companies engaged in public works complained with worrying lengthening of payment times by the public authorities. And according to a survey, it emerged that 60% of companies experience payment delays from the public administration. These are my 4 points on the report, and thank you very much for inviting us.
Many thanks, Roman. I think this is very interesting to hear about the experience of Italy. And I mean, you mentioned several times issues which are related to G2B. In fact, this will be the topic of our next thematic report. So stay tuned for more work on this. I would like now to give the floor to Charles Bryant. You have long experience and very deep knowledge of e-invoicing. Charles, what is your view on the issue of e-invoicing with respect to late payments?
Okay, very happy to present my ideas on this and participate in this debate. As you say, I was founder of the European E-Invoicing Service Providers Association, which is an important element in this business, the supply side for solutions. The company, by the way, that association has now changed its name because it's gone global. It's now called GINA Global. Exchange Network Association is what it's called. I also work for PEPOL in Brussels, which is an important invoicing network, and where interoperability around the world is important. I'll touch on that in a minute. Okay, well, it's been stated already that e-invoicing is growing rapidly. Let's not dwell on that. We're into a big wave of expansion. We must also make the point that it's a platform for efficiency, transparency, and interestingly, the tax authorities have noticed there are fiscal benefits. I'd just like to make one slightly careful statement that when we talk about supply chain efficiency, which is how documents and transactions pass from suppliers to buyers, I call that supply chain efficiency. And then there's another aspect of the efficiencies, and that's the tax, the optimization of tax flows. This should be a win-win, but we have to be careful that dominant parts of the activity, maybe an assertive tax authority, may unintentionally sometimes distract from the efficiency gains at the level of the business sector. I'll come back to that perhaps. History has been touched on. Accounts payable automation was the beginning process. Larger companies automating their bigger suppliers. 80-20 principle, 20% of the suppliers account for 80% of the volume. Naturally, accounts payable automation and invoicing came in for that segment. There was another force at work, which is still very common, and that is the growth of PDF invoicing. It's an interesting topic because this is really just a paper invoice put into the form of a message over the internet. We have to be careful. It's not transmissible or automatable in terms of process, but there are solutions to solving that. The second big wave was government procurement, the 2014 regulation that's been mentioned already, the directive. And then lastly, this whole economy approach, which is now happening. Obviously, process acceleration is an enabler for prompt payment. Let's put on one side the 20% of companies who deliberately take policy actions in a behavioral sense to delay payments. That's been said already. I don't need to touch on that. But error reduction, data accuracy, a joined up supply chain. By the way, e-invoicing is often used as a sort of metaphor because the e-invoice is the link between the procurement process and the payment process. It's always a very important linking pin. But there are many other stages, as Roman has already indicated. There are many other logistics reports and progress reports that need to be also digitized if we're to get the real benefit. For example, some companies find it difficult to issue the invoice if they haven't already received a purchase order. That can be a delay. Before they get out of the starting gate, they're still waiting for a piece of information. So attention has to be paid to that. But clearly, we can have fewer delays. We can use what are called the economies of reuse and repetition. Paper doesn't get stuck, or invoices don't get stuck in paper form in people's desks. SMEs are a challenge. It's been touched on. But nevertheless, the mandate, which brings them into scope, is going to be a huge change agent. And for them, we need easy-to-use tools. We need to be able to provide the SME with what they get now routinely through online banking. Nobody worries too much about online banking anymore. It works. And the same can happen using what are called cloud solutions that has been mentioned already. Accounting software can be updated. So some of the big issues, big principles at stake here, in order for this to succeed, private sector initiatives need to be understood as requiring, first of all, competition, because only through competition do you get the choices that people need, but you also need cooperation. Why do you need cooperation? We need standards. Standards have been created for this business. They need to be made more aware of, and they need to be implemented. And this famous word interoperability, which some people regard as quite impenetrable as a phrase, I'm secretary to a global interoperability forum. This is the ability of an end user to talk to all of their counterparts. They can access their counterparts, their buyers, and for that they need interoperable networks. And it's very important that these are based on standards. Government work is very important. There needs to be some sort of private-public partnership, and especially when you've got the mandates, we need to be very careful, as I said earlier, about how you operate these. Supply chain finance was mentioned. I'm always a bit dubious about why an SME should pay for money they're already owed. It seems to me that the core issue is getting that process acceleration and the payment made. And for that, they need skills, they need to work on solutions, but nevertheless, they don't all have to install software. This can be provided by people like Adam, just to push one solution through what's called a cloud solution. So I'm optimistic, and we can touch on some of these issues in the discussion. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Charles, for this super interesting overview, and also to complement what others said with some interesting aspects. I mean, I think it was very interesting that the element you touched upon about the track record. So the fact that somehow companies, by keeping track of the invoicing, can build some sort of track record of the counterpart and how actually or their payment behavior, which I think it's quite interesting. I mean, in the conversation that we're having, and also what Bea highlighted at the end of her presentation, is that a key element is payment behavior, and track record and credibility can help actually to switch behavior. I mean, if you pay systematically late, you may have less counterpart actually willing to work with you. So in this sense, it could work indirectly as an incentive. I also think that it's very important that the point that you mentioned about standards. And the fact, I think this is part of the design, no? of invoicing and creating standards, so that the information actually can be is certainly including in the invoicing, but it can also be extracted and analyzed in a fast way. So this is these elements which may not be seen in the big debate, actually can prove to be extremely important. So I would like now to open the floor for questions. So I would like to invite again the audience to share their thoughts and questions using the Q&A function. I see that Antonella has a couple of questions. I would like to ask Antonella, maybe just to ask directly questions to the panelists.
Okay, thank you very much, Cinzia, and thank you very much to all the panelists. My first question is, does invoicing also helps dealing with claiming the late payment interests and the compensation? Because one key element that emerged when we did the impact assessment for the revision of the late payment directive, and even in previous assessments, is that at least 70 or even 80% of businesses, when paid late, do not claim late payment interest and the 40 euro minimum compensation. So that's the first question, whether this could be the invoicing could help. And then I had a specific question also to Charles. First of all, Charles, I think apologies, I forgot to mention you in my introduction, so was not intentional. So it's but I'm very happy to have you here today. A question to you, and maybe also to all. So it appears that through invoicing, there is a lot of data already available on payment records and payment performance. So how can this information could be made more available? I mean, I'll be pragmatic. We are an observatory. And as things stand out at the moment, in the first reading of the European Parliament, the Parliament made this observatory an integral part of the revision of the late payment directive. So how could this observatory use and dig from this data in order so to improve its analysis and its assessment. So I think this is the last step that we need to have more clear information. So thank you very much.
Adam?
If I may, I was going to comment on the first question first. And I think this goes to trading relationships as much as policy and procedure. If a small supplier or a smaller supplier is paid late by a larger customer, they are very nervous about trying to ask for compensation. They don't want to put their trading relationship at risk. And very often, even if they could request the compensation and interest, they'll choose not to for commercial and business relationships reasons. That said, when we've removed intentional late payers that are left, that actually links to the second question, because businesses that pay late intentionally typically are paying all their suppliers late or all their smaller suppliers late. And that's where you can observe the patterns, and regulators have the opportunity to step in without the fear of upsetting a trusted trading relation and without the fear of being cut out by a dominant customer.
Many thanks, Adam. Charles, would you like to?
Yeah, I mean, just on this question, I really agree with what Adam's just said. Remember, the invoice is in the center of a private commercial transaction, even if a public authority happens to be the party to whom one is shipping goods or services. So therefore, this is surrounded by a lot of contract law. There's a lot of steps, and therefore the ability to collect data, this data just is never collected. So the only way around this, I think, is voluntary action through surveys, as Adam has mentioned as well. I can't imagine a better way to do this. I mean, just like we talk about bad debts and payment performance and, you know, all of the things you see on the internet, which are often quite unreliable, by the way. The sort of Google, I'm not going to mention them specifically, but Google have a lot of information about people's opinions of the people they do business with. It seems to me that that area, through business associations, might be a way to collect information. But the idea that you would have total transparency on what is going on in the economy through the detailed records of payment performance seems to me to be unlikely, certainly you know, in the period ahead. What we should do is get this thing so automated that people don't worry about it. I mean, for example, when you leave a credit card on a table for in a restaurant, very few people know what happens then. It's so automated in the payment sphere. I mean, I was involved a decade ago in the automation of the European payment system for the euro, the so-called single euro payments area. Nobody worries too much about the actual means of payment anymore. There was a time 20 years ago when there were so many different varieties of payment instrument in use within the EU that itself was a cause of great problem. We no longer have a big problem with the means of payment. It is this behavioral area and contractual and systems technology area that we're touching on that can cause the problems. So I think it's the observatory, which I very much support, and I've been involved with this, you know, ever since it started. I think it's a great project. We need to think quite sophisticatedly, if that's the word, about how databases could be built, probably on a voluntary basis. Fiscal authorities are, of course, pretty nervous about exposing taxpayer data other than on a very generalized basis. So we have to think it through. Are there any neat and clever ways to do it? But I would argue that the first thing is let's get the automation done. And we're on the brink of that now. In the next 10 years, we won't recognize ourselves in 10 years' time. I really don't think so, especially with the mandates. They're not an absolute panacea, but they will create volume, and that's the important thing. Thank you.
just like to expand further, and I agree with everything Charles says, actually. You're reflecting my thoughts. Automation is absolutely the first step. But beyond that, when I talk about e-invoicing, I tend to split it into 3 buckets. Supply chain efficiency, which is automating and possibly mandating the invoice should be in a structured electronic format between counterparties. Then the tax efficiency. How does the supplier and possibly the customer report up to the tax authority so that they've got visibility, typically to avoid unintentional underpayment of VAT, but also a great method for spotting intentional VAT fraud. But then once you've got both of those, and France would be a good model here, you can extend that by adding what the French have called life cycle status. So you can actually see on the invoice when the invoice was generated, what the payment date was due, and when the payment was sent. These are just flags. They're not saying, yes, the payment has actually gone through this specific bank account. The supplier says, here's the invoice. The customer says, I've sent you payment. The customer says, I've received payment. You've got that data, and where, because of tax efficiencies, that must be reported to government, governments then have visibility of that at a central level. How wide they want to share it, I 100% agree with Charles. There is a right paranoia around protecting that data. And indeed, go back to France again, they almost consider it critical infrastructure with things like Secnum Cloud to protect the data and prevent it going outside of their legislation remit, legislation walls. So they are solutions, but 80-20. Let's digitize first. Let's fix the unintentional.
Can I give you the user perspective?
Please, Roman.
Yes, I would like to share our experience on the 2 points made by Antonella. The first one is in Italy, interest payments often do not occur at the same time. There is more transparency with e-invoicing, but it doesn't necessarily improve interest payments, as you told Antonella, because companies often prefer to maintain a good business relationship with customers, as Adam said before. On the second question, I would like to share that the Italian government makes public data on the best and worst payers, public authorities, and it is very interesting, even if it is not done regularly by the Minister for Economy in Italy. In our experience, this has produced some improvements in payments by public authorities. Those names had been published in the press, like, for example, some municipalities in the south of Italy.
I think the same happened in Poland, which again is another split payment country, and companies that have a tax debt, the way split payment seems to work in most of the jurisdictions is the customer has to pay all of the invoice to the tax authority, which requires the bad debt list. But it is an effective public mechanism of shaming.
Thanks a lot for this example. It gives also ideas about how actually the process can be improved without sharing information which is private and very sensible. We have just a few minutes. I would like to touch upon one aspect which I think it's important. I think, Adam, you mentioned that one of the main obstacles actually to the adoption of e-invoicing and getting the advantages that it can bring is lack of awareness, especially on SMEs. What can we do? Because this actually could bring quite significant improvement at relatively low cost.
So I like to look at examples, and I would call Singapore out specifically as a great example there. In Singapore, they've run a public awareness campaign. They do adverts on the TV, informing everybody about e-invoicing and the benefit. In Singapore, there is no mandate, but they have a very high adoption. And part of the reason for that is the investment in public awareness and the availability of training on businesses on how easy it is to implement, both as a small and a big business. So look at the way that any other message gets communicated and just follow best practice. It might be in some jurisdictions social is better, in some it's radio and TV, but just advertise it. I mean, there's other mechanisms that are quite effective. Japan, where if you've got a invoice, qualified invoice as they call it there, then the supplier can reclaim the VAT or the consumption tax. If it's a paper invoice, to the best of my knowledge, they can't reclaim the input. So they've created a fiscal incentive, and word of mouth amongst business has driven a massive awareness there. But I'm not sure whether that's the right approach within Europe. I think the Singaporean, let's just tell everybody and tell them why it's good for them, not that they must do it. The carrot is more effective than the stick, to go back to the well-known quote.
Thanks, Adam. Charles or Roman, would you like to share your views on what can be done?
Well, I think it's a question of step by step. I think if we get this digitization process underway, if we get good cooperation between the mandate side, which is often the tax authority, but not just, public procurement authorities are very important. It's been touched on that some governments, I mean, many governments are quite open to the idea that their own public sector performance should be in the public domain. No reason for that. That's a political reality if they want to make it such. But I think it's a question of just perhaps after the first wave of this report that's being put together, this initiative on the observatory, that we start to think of really intelligent ways to build on the data as it builds up and find ways to make performance much more obvious to people. That's all.
Thanks, Charles. Roman?
That's only one sentence to say that huge efforts are made on digitization by public authorities and also by construction companies in Italy. Also thanks to the support of a national recovery plan. And for example, we have a digital innovation hub in Italy for the construction sector, so not only for digitization for e-invoicing, etc., but it is supported by Digital Europe, and we are making a lot of efforts to try to accelerate this process.
Thanks a lot. We have reached the hour, so it's time to close. I really would like to thank the speakers very much for sharing your insights. I think we also close on a positive note, that there is actually quite an optimistic view that digitalization, in particular e-invoicing, can actually help reducing late payments and may provide also some incentives to change behavior, to improve behavior of companies. So on this positive note, I would like to close and thank you very much for your participation, and many thanks to all those who stayed with us until now and listened. Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Thank you from my side as well. Thank you. Thank you to all. Bye.